The ancient art of divination has gained much popularity of late. This is all part of the great spiritual reawakening that is happening all around us. And if you were to go into sometimes quite surprising places, I found a set in a supermarket. You can find diverse types of tarot cards, oracle cards, crystal oracles, sets that allow you to scry, divination, divining rods. These are getting quite a resurgence in interest and in popularity. However, one thing that you do not see that much of, but is in truth possibly one of the most ancient divination systems, is of course the ancient art of cleromancy, astrogalomancy, and cephomancy. And what that is the use of die or dice to gain messages and signs and portents from the divine. The history of dice is increasingly seen as being more and more and more ancient. The more we are researching into these areas, the earlier we are finding examples of the dice, and they are in truth quite surprising. We know that the Romans used die. The die is the singular, dice is the plural. And that their use of the word aleator, which means a dicer, is actually a put down. It means someone who gambles with dice, because dice was seen as actually being a divinatory instrument. They were a way with which we could connect with the divine. For the Roman tradition, they traced it back to the Etruscans. You would have a row of brass plaques with different readings on them with a number. You would throw the dice, you would calculate the number, and you go to the corresponding brass plaque. And this took out any chance of anyone manipulating your reading. And we know that the Greeks also did this, but they traced it back to the Egyptians. And we know the Egyptians used dice of various forms. The Tibetans used dice called mo, which usually have Tibetan letters on them, though increasingly there are also dice with numbers on them. And by throwing them, you get a combination which you then go to a text. The most common text was created by Mipam Rinpoche in about the early 19th, late 18th century. And you would go to the corresponding number and you would get your reading. But we have found traces of dice in Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, the Indus Valley. And these are the die that we are used to, the six-sided die that have numbers on them, looking surprisingly modern. And we found the earliest so far goes back about 5,000 years. And it's quite likely that with the collapse of the Indus civilization, that these die travelled out and as refugees escaped across to what is now Mesopotamia or Iraq. They established, we are fairly certain, the Sumerian civilization. And with it they brought the use of dye for the purpose of oracles. The use of dice in gambling by virtually all civilizations was looked down upon. The use of the term aliato a dicer in Latin does have a derogatory sense, in the one that you throw dice to win something. You are manipulating fortune. You are manipulating the divine to get an outcome, to gain something, instead of to receive wisdom and information. But it's quite possible that the die are even older than this. I was introduced to the die as an oracular and shamanic tool by a revered teacher of mine who was a Norwegian shaman or wise man. And before I was introduced to the runes, I was introduced to the dice game. Now, the dice game is one of these performative things. If you've ever dealt with Norwegians, you will know that they do love to put on a show. You will get Odin's eye as they're ready to throw the die. There's a performance involved, and this is very much part of the shaman's bag of tricks. Why? Because everything you are doing has to put your mental continuum into that other state. Within the Nordic system, dice are very often linked to Odin, the Allfather. Hence, the eye thing. One eye is lost, and with the other eye, he sees things of spiritual value. He sees into the other world because he has sacrificed that eye. And by doing it ourselves, we identify with the god, and thus the god's power enters into us, and the die throwing has an oracular context to it. It's also used as a tool of training. So the shaman's game, the dice game, the blot game, means you will take 5 die. 5 is an interesting number. The runes are organized in 5 et, or families, where there are 5 runes, then 5 runes, then 5 runes, and 5 runes. And very often these have different colors. What these colors are depends upon you. I use a particular set of colors that I am attached to. The purple one isn't counted. I just like purple, and this came, and it sometimes reads for me. Plastic doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. It's made from the remains of really ancient things. But when I do play the game, I use wooden die for this purpose. And part of the game is, it's much like gin rummy. In fact, it's possibly the origin of what became the card game gin rummy. So you throw the die and you will get a series of numbers. So if, for instance, you got 3 numbers of 5 and 2 of 2, that will be considered a run. If you got 4 of 5, this is an example, and 1 not, then that doesn't count. And if you stop at that point, then you have a hand, you have something, and the next person takes it up. And they will throw their numbers, and if they get 3 and 2, then you've basically hit an equal impasse. But the aim is to actually, once you've thrown 3, you can pick up the remaining 2 and throw them again. And if one of them rolls as a 5, then you can pick up the one that's not, and you throw that again. But if neither of them is a 5, or if you throw a 5 and then you throw the dice again and it's not a 5, you've lost the round, and the next person has to take the die, usually their own dice. we're very protective of our dice. And they will then begin their round. And on the surface of it, that is a nice little game. But with all these things, there is another side to it. For as you're throwing them, you are first developing the intent that I am going to play this. And I am going to get this number. And as you do, you then visualize the number you wish to throw. 5. I have a thing for 5s. So you throw them and you visualize the 5. You imagine the 5 rolling. These are the 3 keys of Western occult law. You throw them, and with the purest of concentration and the purest of visualization, you are able to manifest the numbers that you seek. You may not get totally there. You may get 3, and then so you focus again. Now, when you're playing with another person, they are visualizing totally different numbers, and they are focusing upon your die, and you have engaged in this mental battle of wills. And you usually don't enter into this type of competition unless you've practiced this art really well, because it can sometimes catch you unawares, the power of this game. And so by doing it, you sharpen the knife of your mind. It is, for all intents and purposes, a psychic training tool. But we began with the art of divination. And as we know, numbers have meanings. Different cultures assign different meanings to different numbers. So that if, for instance, I was to take the red one. Now, you might see red as corresponding to luck, or to passion, or to love. It can have lots of different meanings. But let's just say luck. I want luck at the moment, so we will focus. And so you would shake it and you open it up and you ask whoever it is that you connect to as the deity of luck, and they are nearly always goddesses, and you throw it. Ooh, 4. Now, I would be rather happy with that, because 4 is the number of this world. And so I could, at a push, if it spoke to me in such a context, see it as, oh, your luck is about to turn, and it's possible that you are going to improve or further your prosperity in this world. I might take black, or blue actually, sorry, and blue, let's say blue is relating to spirituality. One of the systems I practice is the Bön tradition, which is the tradition of the blue cuckoo. And so for me, blue has a particular meaning, but for you it could have a different meaning as well. But for me, it has a meaning of spirituality. And I go, oh, I would like to know, speak to me about my spiritual path. Ooh, 2. Now, 2 is the lovers, 2 is duality, 2 is balance. You can take 100 meanings, and this is the important thing about it, is as with all these systems, it's not set in stone. It develops. Now, how you do that is if you have assigned different meanings to the different dice. when you throw them and you get the different numbers, each number would then speak to a different aspect. What the numbers mean, well, that's for you to decide, actually. And that was the way I was taught. I can tell you the meanings, but they are my meanings. These are your dice. You need to speak to them. They need to speak to you. Have a conversation. Look, become familiar with the symbolism of numbers, the symbolism of colors, and thus you gather the die that speak to the symbolism that you are constructing. But in so doing, you then develop and own and work with a very powerful tool. And yet, to the average punter, let's move you over there. To the average punter, they're just a set of dice. You're just playing some silly game. But every now and again, when you're out playing it, you will see someone just at the corner of your eye giving you the look, the Odin's eye. And they're usually someone who've also know the secret of this dice. These are sacred tools that allow us to access, to divine, to connect with the other world, the divine world. And the deities that rule over these are nearly always women. Odin may throw the dice, but he got them from a woman. Freak. In the Roman tradition, of course, it was the goddess Fortuna. In the Egyptian tradition, it was the goddess Auset or Isis. Before that, it was Hathor. There are some traditions, some texts that hint that Tehuti played with dice, but he got it from Hathor. In Asia, in the Indian system, of course, the dice are ruled by the goddess Lakshmi, who is the goddess of prosperity, the goddess of abundance, the goddess of this world. What all these deities have in common is they are this earth. And so the spirituality and the messages that you're accessing tend to be very physical, very about this world, this life, this state of being. But as a tool, this simple, beautiful tradition, passed on from mouth to ear, is ancient beyond belief, older than tarot cards, older than runes, older than Ogham, older than many, many traditions. As we said, the Indus Valley civilization, we have found six-sided dice that are 5,000 years old and quite likely much older than this, and it may of course come from somewhere else. That is a whole discussion about what some people would like to call the antediluvian world or the pre-Ice Age world for those who like crypto history. But for us, the die are a powerful, powerful tool. And this is hinted even in their name. Our modern world, of course, one is die to a dice or dice. Die comes from the old French de. And this comes from the Latin datum. And datum means that which is given. Now, those of a gambling predilection think that what's given is luck. Those of us who have a more spiritual and mystical bent think that what is given are actually signs, portents, and indicators of fate, fortune, which includes luck, but also includes the flow of our lives, the weaving of the cord upon which our life is woven by the three fates or the three Norns and their many variants. Misusing these things, there are clear warnings. And if we were to go back to closer to the origin of what we see as the modern dice, which is India, if you were to go to the Mahabharata, the whole sad story of the downfall of the Pandavas and eventually the downfall of civilization starts with the playing of a game of dice. And it's in playing this game of dice that the whole series of events is set in motion, which brings about both the doom and the salvation of all involved, including us. And you can go to many mythologies, from the Icelandic, Nordic sagas through, where there are warnings about misusing these devices. But should you choose to use them, I heartily recommend it. And in time, as for me and my teacher and the many people I know who play this game, you can join that long line that goes back far into history, far before written records. And in so doing, what will be given to you, the datum, is the wisdom of the ages, insight into the present, and if you are truly blessed, guidance into the future. I am Dr. Shimon de Valencia, but I am also the Merry Mystic, and this has been our exploration of a beautiful, beautiful tradition that deserves to survive. Namaste.